Hello students. So in this module of research methodology, we have reached the 7th lecture of the series. Now, in the previous series, you have basically learned about the concept of research, the research design, the hypothesis, the data analysis, the data collection measures, and all the other intricate nitty-gritties which goes into the collection of data and the proper conduction of a research process. Now, all this excessive data which we have collected will come into use only after it is presented in a proper format. This format is nothing but the report through which we tend to summarize, conclude, and give the total findings of our research in a condensed manner so that it could be put to use by the authorities. So, in order to know what goes into the process of writing a research, this particular unit will let you understand the processes which goes into writing of a good research. Now, in order to give a good research, you need to follow certain frameworks where the report writing process is itself carried. Now, the report writing process itself is a methodology which is very much put into practice to get a condensed form of your findings. Now, this will aid you to be familiarized with the different writing methods and techniques which we employ while doing a research study. This will also assist you in writing the reports for both the qualitative and the quantitative measures. So basically, in today's outline, we will be learning about the research report. What is a research report? Why do we need the research report, or the needs or the roles that a research report necessarily plays? Then the different types of research reports, the process of writing the report, the various stages that we undergo while writing the report, then how a report is structured or what is the format of a report, the delivery of the report, that is how would you present your report to the concerned authorities, how the computers aid in the entire process of report writing, and the assessment of the research report. So basically, in today's class, we'll be dealing about the aspects of report writing and why it is essential for any research study. Now, what is a research report? We have heard about research methodology. We have heard about research design. Now, we are going to deal with the research report writing process. So, the results of a research study needs to be formally communicated in the form of a research report. So, it is very important that the findings of any studies needs to be organized in a systematic manner, in a logical manner, so that we can use the process to conduct the further study. Now, when in the earlier chapters we have discussed about the process of collection of data, namely the primary data and secondary data, we had left emphasis on the fact that the primary data already consists of facts that has been researched, and it is available in the form of journal articles, it's available in the form of published versions, it's available in the form of books and reports. So all of these are nothing but the total summation of the research process that you have carried out. So basically, the process of research report includes the process of documenting anything that you have carried out during your entire research endeavor. The preparation and transmission of a clear, accurate and convincing report effectively communicates the research findings. For example, you conduct a research on the usage of the dustbins in a official setup. Now, simply going and observing whether the people are using the dustbins appropriately, that is, they are disposing the things into wet waste, dry waste and reject waste or not, is not sufficient. So you need to have a report from the time period that method was conducted, the necessity for including that method, the necessity of segregation, what effect did it have, did people go by the segregation process, or were there any difficulties in implementation of the segregation process of disposal, or were there any difficulties faced by workers during the collection of the segregated disposal material and so on. So all of these, if you say it verbally, it will not last. It might be spread to one person or two person who are immediately working with you. But what happens is, if it is not properly recorded, if it's not properly documented, then the entire process of doing the door-to-door survey, the interview method, the entire questionnaire method, going and observing it will all go futile. So, the preparation and transmission of a clear and accurate report is very essential. Now, why is it essential? It is essential because regardless of the quality of research, the findings will not be utilized by the decision makers unless the report is properly understood. So, if your entire observation of the effects of segregation of waste disposal is not properly documented, if you do not indicate via your research process the various flaws that occur, or if you cannot document properly, systematically in a logical manner, the pros and cons of implementation of the segregated disposal system, the authorities will not get a clear-cut picture. So, what will happen is, this will directly hinder the process of getting the file passed. Now, once the file is not passed into the various stratas of the government, so it becomes a lost cause. So it's very important for you to document in every stage and give it to the decision makers. And once the problem is understood properly, only then the government can come up with a solution. So why do we need a report? A report serves three functions. It organizes the data, it establishes the quality of research and motivates appropriate action. So basically, it will serve three functions. Firstly, it will organize your data. In any research study that you carry out, it is very essential for the data to be organized. Now, the organization of the data is again subdivided into classes where the data will be observed, described, explored, and then you establish the quality of the research and the motivation for an appropriate action to take place at the end of the research report scrutiny once you submit it. So basically, the research report will organize the data and analyze the findings in both a logical and lucid manner, thus giving them a permanent form. So due to its systematic style, it serves as an essential reference for the future research on related lines. So when you give a organized, systematic and lucid report, what happens is you are submitting a permanent form. It is called a permanent form because whenever the authorities want to go back, they can go back to your material and have a quick look on how the research was conducted, what were the findings at that point of time, what were the gaps of your research, and whether there needs to be a different approach undertaken to solve the issue. So, because of the systematic style, it serves as a reference guide for any other further activity that will take place for that particular issue. Now, since many executives cannot easily ascertain the quality of research design, questionnaire or experiment, the report is treated as an index of the researcher's skill and performance. If I am sitting in the central government today and I ask you to conduct a survey regarding the implementation of the sanitation programs in rural India. Now, sitting in Delhi, being a part of the government office, I might not be aware of the inner workings which goes on in rural India. So I'll simply call you and I'll tell you that please go and give me a detailed report on what is happening. Now, for a program like sanitation, where India is still not advanced, where Indians still believe in the concept of not having a toilet in the house, it is not possible for the government to go and explain that the places where the pipelines were set up for the construction of public toilets have been demolished and people have set up shops say tailoring shops, or they have set up schools, or they have set up grocery stores in places where the public toilets should have actually been set up. So what is happening is you go into the depth of the problem, you analyze the problem, you observe it, then you prepare your questionnaires because that is essential for you to know the mindset of the people. Then after the questionnaires, what you do? You start with your experimentation process. So the experimentation process could be such that you try installing a toilet at home and you see the repercussions. Probably it might get broken up and so on. You try putting people in difficult conditions such that they have no option but to use the toilets which you have installed at their home and so on. So you need not need to make the government understand of your inner details which you have gone through in making the implementation of a sanitation program a success. What you need to do is you need to prepare a report where you lucidly state what methodology you have used, what was your research design, what were your hypothesis, what kind of experiment you prove, what kind of logical conclusion and solution you have come up with because of the problem. So all this creation goes on record. Now on record would be nothing but the report which you send either in a paperback format, or either you send it in a hard copy format, or either you send by mail, DVD ROMs and so on. Now it so happens that some people might not have the time to actually see how you have implemented the process. They will just look it on an overall basis and then they will move forward from the point. So the moving forward from the point would be sanctioning or allocation of money and resources for construction of more toilets. Now this glitch period which you have covered is well recorded and it does not get futile. So if someone wants to take your research, they can do so as a guiding framework by going back to the report which you have created. So basically it is very important that at the end of your research process, your research is clearly documented. Now the most important need for writing a research report is the determination of action taken. Efficient reports lead to appropriate actions or policies. They inspire decision makers to promptness. So what is happening here is, if you write a report, not only your research report, from your research process, you let the journalists or people who write social articles, you may ask them to make a report of the paucity of the public sanitation system in rural India. What happens? The message gets spread up to the central and international level. Now, once the matters are recorded and reported up to the national or international level, it is very easy to efficiently take appropriate actions and policies because it comes directly under the scanner. So what happens? The decision makers are left with no option but to be prompt in their action which they ought to take. So since each research project is different, the process of communicating the research also varies. So if we have implemented this aspect for a sanitation program, we might implement another form of research design and to say bring to light the problem of road accidents and so on and forth. The process of conducting the research design might be different, but there is one constant which combines all research is the report that you give to people at the end of your research study. Now, what are the different types of reports? Depending on the nature of the problem, the information contained therein, and the individual preferences of those who utilize the report, the findings may be reported in the following ways. So, every research design, every research problem will have a different aspect. Now, the differences would come to light only after going through the research report and designing. Now, what happens is, the report for publication, which are normally condensed report prepared for articles in trade and professional journals and popular magazines, are a type of report. So, if you are reporting on the practice of running every weekend, running every weekend by the employees of your organization for a particular marathon, and you are promoting a cause, for example, breast cancer awareness cause or something, all of these would go into the articles or the journal articles which your popular magazines or journals or even trade journals write about. So basically, the amount of money which you collect, the funds received, goes for charity of that particular cause. Then you have technical reports. Now, technical reports are usually intended for scientifically or technically trained persons, where the scientific description of the entire procedure employed, including introduction and hypothesis research up to the bibliography, is provided. For example, if you have to give me a report on the use of molten lava which comes out from a volcano and what are its effects, you need to give me the entire detailed reporting that you believe that the lava which is collected from the erupting volcanoes are very rich in minerals. So, how would you do? You give me the scientific process on how, wearing specifically designed costumes, the geographical scientist goes into the site of the volcanoes and with spades and buckets, obviously of high temperature resistance, they go to the site of volcano, collect the lava or the molten matter which are erupted from the volcanoes, and how that matter is cooled and how that matter is put to use. So your hypothesis which states that the lava erupted is of a very high and concentrate density of good minerals and vitamins is going to be tested and experimented through the various tests conducted in the laboratory setup, and the entire process from where you got the idea to the process of implementation, etc., will be thoroughly carried out in your research report. So your aims, the methods, the titles, the methodology, the rationale, the objective, the need, the conclusion, the findings, everything, including the bibliography, the appendices, everything will be provided in your technical report. Then the next will be report for executives, entail findings that can be orally presented in the form of PowerPoint presentations. So unlike technical presentations, these are not voluminous by nature and do not contain stringent terminologies of research. For example, you are promoting a particular brand of oil. Say you are promoting a heart healthy oil with the required amount of mufa and pufa and God knows what. So now, in order to establish how it is good for your health and what benefits do these oils have by their consumption and all of these will be shown in a presentation format, because you need to understand that not everyone is trained in research methodology, and even if people are trained in research methodology, the modes of specializations are different. Some might be trained only in the qualitative aspect of research methodology, while others are trained into the quantitative aspect of research methodology. Some might be into only the subjective analysis of a research, and that is how the training is carried out. Some are trained only in the quantitative or measurement aspect. Some are trained on the fundamental aspects of research. So there might be a difference in the methodologies which does not demerit them from the fact that they are not aware of the research methodology process. So what happens is, for executives specifically who had large business houses and all, it is essential that it is presented to them in a quick and easy manner, where they are told, look at this product. So we already have a normal Saffola oil in the market, and then we have launched the heart oil. Now in comparison to the olive oil which is in the market, our oil is doing better business because of the fact that it gives you the same benefits at a reasonable rate. Or we will say that it is not giving us the revenue which we are expecting because it is not able to penetrate into the olive oil business market. So what is happening is, you are laying bare facts and you are giving your response, but without the research terminologies. Am I clear? So what happens is, irrespective of whether you are presenting it with a thorough hardbound copy of your research, or irrespective of the thing that your research presentations are seen by everyone or not, at mini level, at an executive level, you are entailing your findings and you are presenting it in ways and means which are easily and lucidly comprehended by the policymakers of your company. Now, what are the early innings of the research writing process? So you need to begin writing up the report as soon as you can. when someone does their PhD, the very first thing that is told to them is you should write. You should write daily. You should make it a habit to write at least for 20 minutes in a day. Now what is happening is you are instilling the habit of writing. Now writing does not imply you are practicing your Roman and cursive letter fonts, but you are putting the effort of recording and streamlining your data collected in a specific manner. So what is happening here is when you write daily, you are going into a semi-research mode where apart from your daily findings, you are monitoring your findings and you are getting your better insights on how to carry on with your research process. So the thing is, you should not leave it until you have finished your data collection before you start writing up. Many sections can be drafted during or even after data collection. So the PhD thesis which you submit is a 10,000 chapter each, minimum 10,000 words each chapter which you submit. Now, once you know your area of study properly, shelling out 10,000 words is something which can be done. But the more you do it, the more better insights you do, the more skimming is happening, the more polishing is happening, the more refined is your data presentation. So you will not leave it until you are done with the entire research process. So it is a constant process. You do it day in and out until the time comes that you do not need to memorize your findings. You know it by heart. So you will not leave the data until you have finished your collection and you start writing up from day one. So many sections can be drafted alongwise or at the end of it. Now write down ideas as soon as you get them rather than leaving them up to the writing stage. So what happens is this is where many researchers either become successful researchers or they fail as researchers. The reason being is quite simple, that they do not adhere to a stringent writing process. What is the need to carry on experiments day in and out if you are not recording them in a systematic manner? What is the need of reading your text day in and out, selecting on primary text and then going on to secondary text and forgetting about the concepts you have read or building on new concepts by totally foregoing about the old concepts? It's not necessary and essential. So the thing is, you need to write. You need to write in such a way that if you have a eureka moment where you suddenly realize that you have an eruption of ideas, you better shut up and write. So the thing is, in order to aid so, you need to keep a research diary where you can safely note your ideas. So you do not need to be a poet. You do not need to be a sudden erratic math scientist who will suddenly start scribbling on the walls of a classroom or a laboratory, or the poet who will take a tissue paper and scribble lines. No, you need to have a solid content. You need to have a solid book where you record your content. So a research journal or a research diary is highly essential in the process. You know what happens then? Suppose you read a book and you find it relevant to your work. You note it in a proper order. So when you go on to write your actual research report, what happens is your bibliography is ready. You can cite it the way you want to cite, and your research report will give a perception to the examiners or the readers that you have done a very strong and effective research. If you do not inculcate that habit, what happens is You might have a whole lot of ideas. Your presentation might be excellent, but probably you might not be able to totally cover up those aspects in your presentation. Then as a result of which it all goes kaput. Your entire efforts will go for a toss. So it's essential for you to keep a research diary where you can safely note any ideas. Now, not all of your ideas will be useful, but it is certain that some of them will be. So, do not imagine that you'll be able to remember these ideas at a later date. Practically, it's not possible because you cannot remember. Biologically, it's not possible. When we had done the unit of observation, hypothesis and all, and then we came across a concept called memory and decay. Why? Because memory is something which you store. The brain is like a storage bin, but it goes into a self-cleaning process. And why is it essential? Because if there is an overload of information, you will end up being a useless case. For example, I told you about the example of a person named Funes. Now, what happened was Funes was a protagonist in George Louis Borges' book, Funes the Memorials. Now, Funes had this weird inability where Funes had this disease of forgetting things. So, what Funes used to do is, Funes used to suffer from hyperthymesia. Now, hyperthymesia is the inability to forget things. Now, as a result of this overload of information, Funes suffered from an inexplicable physical condition. Now, what happens in the research state is you need to constantly monitor your thoughts. Otherwise, given the biological process of forgetting, your data will be not validly recorded. Moreover, even if the recording happens, then what goes on is that you lose on vital stuff. There may be an overstimulation and you might have lots of overload of unnecessary irrelevant data, or you might totally do away with the relevant data and submit things which are not meant to be used in your research study. So it's very essential that you begin early on. You do not leave until your data writing process is completed. You have to draft sections again and again before you complete the data process. Then it's essential that you write down as soon as you get the idea, and you maintain a research diary so that the useful bits of idea is collected and you do away with ideas which you find irrelevant, or you go through the already recorded material, skim it according to your benefit, and then use it for your research study. The problem which we have discussed here is illustrated in this diagram. Now, what is happening here is you have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 researchers. Now, all of them are going into the dilemma of whether to go on with the research process. If yes, how, and if not, why. So here the first researcher is saying to the second researcher, so after 3 months of writing the report, I had thought this. Again, if I were our audience, would I read this? And the answer was no. So you scrapped it and you wrote this. What? And waste 3 months of work. That's the original work. So the dilemma which you go in the process of recording your data is also crucial. So what is happening here is that after you record your data, you realize that you were a fool to record this kind of irrelevant data which you thought was extremely useful for the past 3 months. So because you wrote down, now you are able to analyze it after a time period of 3 months, and you realize that you need to completely forgo the work which you have done in 3 months because it's not in tune with the research process. So basically what we are doing here is that the process of recording our research is enabling us to research or redo the work which we have already done, correct it, manipulate it for the larger, better need. Now, carrying on with the report writing. Be aware of the nature of the report and the intended audience. So, if you are intending to give a report to a minister, you be better assured that the report carries only the necessary points or intentions of your research in bullet, because the person simply does not have any time. If you are submitting the report to a business executive, make sure you do not use much of the research terminologies, because simply that person will have no time to go through your research report. If it is for a student research project, then you ensure that you have read and understood the criteria laid down by your institution in terms of content, presentation, length, and so on. Now, if you are writing for a journal, ensure that your research fits within the scope of that journal's objective as well as its editorial requirements. So it's very essential. Not everything that you write forms a part of psychology. So if you were to write an article in, say, the American Psychological Association, you simply cannot go and write a article on your feelings and emotions. You will write articles pertaining only to the editorial requirement of that association. Now, if you're producing a report or a piece of consultancy, ensure that you're clear about the requirements of your audience. That is, that whatever you are publishing should be kept in mind that the material which you are publishing is going for a particular purpose, particular study, and the needs are different. So you alter your research writing or report writing in a manner that is suitable for the needs of the publishing house that you are submitting your research material for their use. Now, continuing with the research writing process. Now, make sure you begin writing up, that you make backups for your work and every available opportunity. Whatever you do not assume that whatever you save on a hard drive will be safe. Today morning I learned a lesson while making your presentation that I should save my work not only in the pen drive but also mail it to myself at every possible time. So I learned it the hard way, because whatever I had worked last night, everything got erased and I had to redo it again today. So in the research process also, when you are recording your data, be assured that the finest quality of the hard drive, the finest quality of the hard disk will not be sufficient enough to solve your data woes. They will give in, they will conk out at any form of time. So what you do is, you should make sure that you have ample backups. Now, the only practical solution that I have come to find out based on my personal experiences is this, that you need to mail yourself. And if you forget the password of your mail, make sure at least you have recovery backup for the mail passwords. Because I tend to forget my mail passwords as well. So you can imagine how pathetic I am at certain instances. So basically, when you write something, the notebook is essential, but what happens if it rains and the notebook gets wet, gone? What happens when you suddenly get your eureka idea in a cafe? You make down the notes diligently and you leave it in the cafe, and someone just flips it off as a wasted thing. Probably you might not be able to get it. Gone case. Again, your entire hard work goes for a toss. Then what happens if you have recorded everything in your computer or your pen drive or your hard drive, and even that gives off? Then what do? You again find an alternate means of making yourself so that that particular thing is at least retrieved and can be used again. So whatever you do to ensure that your hard work does not go in waste, you need to keep backups in separate locations. As a further safety measure, print out whatever you have written so far at regular intervals. Just in case your email also comes up, then it hardly doesn't happen, but it's always safer to get the printouts of the materials so that you could, go back to it whenever you need it. Now, you'll not be able to write the final report out first time. You'll need to rewrite it a number of times before it reaches completion. You should allow for this when you're planning your research timetable and not be discouraged when the first date is not perfect. No matter if you are a good researcher, if you are on point with your research methodology, if you are equipped with the ideas that, okay, now I know I need to carry a backup in several locations for my research data, you might be on point on everything. But what happens if you are not able to write? There is this notion called as a writer's block. Now, writer's block happens when you are not able to go on with a writing process no matter how much you try it. So, this is a frequent problem which is faced by the researchers, because what happens when they have a writer's block is they simply cannot write. It does not mean the physical inability to write the letters, but it implies the mental inability to grasp and delve further into your research subject and write it out. So what's happening is, because of your inability, if your target was to achieve 10,000 words in 5 days, you might be just producing 2,000 words in 5 days, because you cannot write, you cannot generate ideas, you cannot beat out of the box and develop ideas. So, do not be disheartened, because it's a very common problem in the academia, and which is why you need to give yourself the time frame that while writing the draft, if I am not able to write the draft at a proper time period, allow me the period where I can get over my writer's block and I can carry on with the writing process. So, there's also a notion that if you have a writer's block, you tend to write good things once the block is removed. For example, Richard Powell in his novel Galatia 2.2 suffers from writer's block, that is his inability to write after a certain period of time. So there's no cure for writer's block, but you can give yourself the time and space in your research where you have the flexibility to go back to your work and you have the flexibility to carry on from where you left, all thanks to the time gap you are giving and the systematic documentation which you are making through your research writing processes. Now, what are the stages of writing the report? Now, there are various stages through which we write the report. The first is First, clarify the nature of the planned report and its intended audience. If any examples of past reports are available, read as many as you can, both good and bad. Now, if you are conducting a study on, say, the effect of too much of exposure of video games on children. So you might have reports where people have done good research where they are laying out factors of prolonged exposure, the damage it does to the eyes, the damage it does to the overall personality, and so on. Then you might also have certain researchers which might give you ridiculous hypothesis that only if you let children play video games, probably then they turn out to be competitive in nature. So you're not seeing how much is too much in that type of research. So no matter how good or bad, the first thing in any research writing, report writing processes, you need to read the data which is already available. So in order to do so, first you need to clarify the nature of the planned report and its intended audience. Then, if any example of past reports are available, read as many as you can, both good and bad. Identify any predetermined requirements, for example, maximum word length, formatting such as double spacing or required referencing style, and so on. So, any research format, now it's an archaic process where you go into the handwritten mode. When my parents used to do their PhDs, they used to indulge in handwritten notes. They go to the supervisor, give them handwritten materials. Now that process is totally done. What is happening now is the supervisors want typed notes. So the benefit of having a typed note is not only you can go back to it whenever you want, you have sources where you can store them safely, and moreover, if you are, say, doing your PhD from a distant location on a part-time basis, via the mode of technology, you can easily send it to your supervisor for a review. He or she can correct it, and via modes of technology can resend it back to you. Now, it's very essential when you write a research report what format you are using. You can use the American format, the APA format, you can use the Chicago Press format, you can use the Harvard format, you can use the MLA format. Now, MLA format is very essential in report writing. It is standard format which is used by researchers worldwide. Now, for say qualitative research. So, basic necessities of frameworks are maintained for the regularization in MLA format. Like in MLA format, you require to have a double spacing between your words. MLA format will let you know how many words specifically are required for a particular form of writing. For example, in MLA format, it is usually prescribed that for abstract writing, you will use 100 to 150 words max. And abstract beyond that, if it goes, then it's not an abstract, it's just a paragraph of some useless information which is not necessary at all. So, the style, the referencing style, we use Times New Roman 12 with double spacing. So that is the basic style. You just don't use any Arial fonts, or you just don't use any Calibri fonts and so on. So there is a mode which you follow in MLA formatting. Ideally, you should familiarize yourself with past projects so you have an idea of the final product before you start. There are many databases, like you have JSTOR, which will give you a compilation of all the articles which are published domain-wise. You have EPW archives, you have many other databases like Shodhganga and all, and then you have databases which your university might subscribe to. All of these databases will give you a collection of materials which has been already published in that domain. Now with that, when you read through whatever has been already published, you go through the process of creating a data bank yourself. So when you record the things, it is essential that you start with the theses which are already published, or the dissertations which have been already published, so that you know how things have been done previously, what were the gaps in the literature, and how should you intend to go about it next. So these are very essential. Now we come to the next slide, which is the drafting phase of your report. Now you should write the first draft of the report. You should not anticipate the first draft being your final submission. When you write your report, it is not always such that your draft which you write would be put into immediate use. So what happens is, you should not anticipate that one writing and you are done, because only if you write again and again will you be acquainted with the flaws of your report. So it is very essential that you have, say, hundreds of drafts before you can actually materialize on your final draft. Now evaluate the content of the first draft either through reading it yourself, or preferably getting someone else to read it with a critical eye. Now it so happens that the research project is your baby, and whatever you do, it's your baby. So whatever you make out of that research project will seem all nice to you. So it's very essential that you have someone to give you a honest and critical feedback. Now you can hire someone. We do have proofreaders who go on correcting your research report. They'll see if there are any grammatical errors. They do the necessary spell checks, they do the formatting of your research report, the margin size, how much of margin gap would you provide, the spacings, if they are correct or not. But you also need someone from your domain to give you critical insights on the research report that you are going to publish or defend. Now what happens is, when you give someone to critically analyze your work, not only will you get newer ideas and newer ways of looking at the same old project, but you can also get an idea on how to mold, manipulate your existing research work. For example, if you tell someone that you would like to conduct a research on post-traumatic stress disorder or the effects of war. Now, someone might okay your project, saying that it's a wonderful project. But if you give it to multiple people to go through your work, someone might say, why don't you do it only from the body perspective, the body in pain? So do it and see how the body reacts, the relationship between the healer and the patient, and so on. Some might say do it from the technological perspective, the creation of video games to stimulate and stimulate stress, and so on. So what you're having is someone who is giving you a critical eye, who is going through your work, who is giving you the pros and cons of carrying out with that particular research project. So you get the whole of what you are submitting, you get what the audience wants. So when you finally present your research project, you are solid. Then rewrite and re-evaluate the report as appropriate. You may need to do this more than once. So I've told you, hundreds of drafts. One is just an understatement. you have to rewrite and re-evaluate the report as appropriate as many times you do so. I have seen people who get repulsed by their PhD thesis after a period of 3 to 5 years. They'll be like, what was I thinking at that point of time? Why didn't someone put across this viewpoint while I was doing my research? So you can never be satisfied. You need to write and rewrite, learn, unlearn, and finally you have an impeccable research product at hand. Now, the final phase of report writing. Now, the final phase of report editing and proofreading will culminate to prove the final phase. So once you have got this far, the temptation is to skip over the final proofreading and submit the project. So if someone okays the proof part, now you are getting so involved into that research project that you are now coming to the point of saturation where you simply want to submit your research project and be done by it. So what you need to do is you need to have someone who will monitor you at that point and will not let you get into the temptation, and only once the final proofreading is over, then after going through all the aspects, the grammatical aspect, the spelling aspect, the format. Remember, some interviewers can be style Nazis. So if they do not like the way you have formatted your research work, if you are not using bold letters properly, italics properly, if you are not citing it well, if your bibliography appendices are not on point, no matter what substantial arguments you give, how you defend your thesis, it will not go too well with them. So, submission of the report can be done via mails or via paperback or hardbound format followed by an oral presentation. So basically you have this synopsis period in any PhD where you give a culmination of whatever you have done. Now that goes on for checks not only by people whom you hire but the people from your universities, and from there you go to the point of an oral presentation where you agree to defend your thesis, and only then you get your PhD degree. Now, in cases of business reports, in cases of say reports of social issues where getting a PhD degree is not the question, what happens is appropriate policy steps are taken by the individuals for whom the report is primarily created. For example, if the oil company knows that the hard oil which they are selling is not doing well because it's not able to penetrate the oil marketing business, what they'll do, they will try to improve their branding. They'll try to sell it more and more with modifications until they achieve their desired revenue. For example, if it's coming to the point of sanitation, once the report has reached the proper authorities, they'll make sure that the process is kept under a check and regular supervisions are made until and unless the entire process of sanitation is completely carried out and completed. So on and forth. Now, what is the typical report format or typical report structure? The typical report format will have your title page, it will have your abstract, it will have your acknowledgement. This is an optional section to whom you want to thank for your conduction of the research study and so on. Then you'll have the content, the introduction aspect, the literature review, the methodology, the results discussions, conclusions plus recommendations, your reference list, and the appendices. Now, title of the page report is very essential. No report will go without any title page. For example, our institution might submit various reports on the success of the institute at various levels. But if it does not go by the title page, it is very hard to decipher on what that research data is about. So the title page is nothing but the heading of your report. A title page leads the readers to know what the report is about. Title page should not be similar to an already published report, and the title page should be clear and lucid and should be easily comprehended. So you should not use heavy terminologies in your title page. The title page should be kept as simple as possible. It should be condensed so that the meaning and purpose of your research is clearly seen in the title page. The title page should be such that the reader could read and form an interest only by reading through it. So, for example, if the title page is my research on English literature. Now that's not an appropriate title, but if I am giving a title like contemporary novelist, an analysis of the works by contemporary novelists in post-American literature. So you are giving a clear indication that you are analyzing contemporary novelists. You are then going about the genre of American literature and so on. So title of your report is very essential. The next is an abstract of the research. All this while I am telling you, your abstract should not be more than 100 words or 150 words max. Now what is an abstract? Abstract is not the vague idea, but abstract in research methodology is something very structured, concrete, and forms the basis of the research. So an abstract will consist of what your research aim is, the key background theories, what data were collected, from whom and how was it analyzed, and key findings. So key findings here can also be said as keywords. So for example, an abstract for say hyperthymesia would mean what your research aim is. Your research aim is to find out the effects of not being able to forget or a hyperthymetic memory. The key background theory towards this is if you are not available to forget, then the inability to forget can cause considerable disruptions in the normal life. What were your data collected from and how? So you had collected the data from the surviving 25 people who survived from hyperthymesia, and how was it analyzed? It was analyzed by the use of various cognitive tools, memory tests, and so on. Your key findings would be what? Hyperthymesia, inability to forget, forgetting, memory research, cognitive studies, and so on. The next is introduction of the report. An introduction is a crucial part of any report as it gives us an insight on what the report actually consists of. So the introduction aspect will have its aims, objectives, why you have done it, the justification for carrying out with the research process, how you have presented the report, the signing and the signposting. So introduction will form the doorway of your research. What should a reader look forward into your research work? Now in the introduction aspect, you will give a background of the research work which you are about to carry, your aims and objectives as to why you would like to carry on with that research process, the justification on why have you chosen the topic and how do you plan to proceed with it, and how have you presented the report, and also a signature where you give a anti-plagiarism stance that this materials has not been fabricated or this materials has not been furnished from already published sources, and that you stand true to the research which you have conducted. The next is the literature review. Remember when I first told that you need to read when you do a research project, I was actually implying to the literature review aspect. Now, for a particular topic, there are quite a number of research works already available or done. The quantity can be less or the quantity can be more, or the quantity could be indirect, which might directly lead you towards your research goals. So literature review is nothing but what do we know about the already published literature. What we do not know would be your research gap, how your study will fit the research gap, what you may expect to find, relate the literature to your study, and be critical if you are appropriate. For example, what do you need to know? I need to know the impact of video games on trauma veterans. So what you do not know, I know that video games in general does not go too well with children, with adults, because it is a hindrance to their eyesight, it is time consuming, and you can go on all the entire ways in which you can refute the use of video games. But what you do not know is the effect of video games in a patient suffering from Alzheimer's or a patient suffering from trauma. So how your study fits the research gap? Because it is a study on the individuals. Now you are trying to find out from healthy individuals to unhealthy individuals. So you are shifting your focus from normal toddlers and teenagers to people who are of the geriatric age or a middle age. So you are trying to find out the effect of video games on the war veterans who would be between the primal age range of 40 to 60, and also Alzheimer's patient primal age between 60 to 90. So what you may expect to find, your hypothesis could be it has a good effect on people suffering from Alzheimer's because they force the brain to exercise its recalling capacity if they have to press the next button and carry on with their video game, or it might have a disproportionate or bad effect on veterans because the triggering, the pressing of the video game control would imply pressing of the rifle if they are being stimulated by a war game. Now relate the literature to your study. You will relate all cognitive literatures which are essential for the study. For example, you will relate the already published effects of video games, effects of continuous computer exposure. You will study the effects of stimulators to get certain response and so on. And you need to be critical in your approach by already trying the tested theories, refuting them, and giving your own critical opinions. The next is the methodology. Now, methodology would basically be structured by your information needs, the research design strategy, the method, the sample, the procedure, the analysis, and is it repeatable to the reader or not. Information needs would imply what kind of data you are looking at, what data you should be looking at, and how will you proceed with your data. Research design is your design frame or the particular structure which you would use to carry on with your research. The research strategy would be the ways and means, the techniques which you will employ in order to carry on with your research design. This would also include the methods, the sample on which you are going to conduct your research design, the procedure on how you would carry it, the analysis of the total carrying out of that process, and if it is repeatable and relatable to the readers or not. So basically, in methodology, what do? You try to answer this question. So in methodology, you might have to explain the rationale behind your chosen means of collecting the information. For example, why have you chosen the ethnographic method in order to conduct a study in a war-infested zone? So you need to have your rationale or the knowledge, the substantial positive factors on why you chose to do an ethnographic research, or why you chose to do just an exploratory research, and so on. So rationale will be nothing but your aims and objectives on why you chose that particular mode of collecting data. Now, are your research methods the most appropriate ones given your chosen hypothesis or research question and your subsidiary questions or objectives? So, if you chose a particular research design, is it suitable? Is it cost effective, time effective, and so on? For example, doing a war study does not imply you traveling to the war zone. Sitting here in India, it does not mean you need to go to Iraq or Afghanistan to study the war. You can certainly use materials which has been already sent, and from there you will not only save your time and energy, but you will also get time to build up your case for a more substantial research. Now, are you making assumptions? You know what you did in terms of research. Have you expressed yourself clearly and given adequate details? Would someone else be able to replicate your study on the basis of the information you have given? So, there are zillions of war studies, but what you are looking at the war would make a difference. Or there might be zillions of business studies. It's not about always finding out how a particular product is doing. It's not about finding out how can you make the particular product more useful, but it could also be about looking below the surface and to make an impactful comeback. So if you have any limitations or anything you could have done differently throughout this entire research design, is studied in the research methodology aspect. Now, results. Now, there is no way to present your results. Some ways could be tables essential for quantitative data, graphs only when they add to some understanding, quotes and theories for qualitative data, only report relevant results, and present tables wherever necessary. So what happens is the results can be published, can be established, but there is no proper way in which it should be published or established. So what you do, you find out how you can present your data in a more effective manner. For that, you make use of tables, you make use of graphs, you make use of quotes and theories for qualitative data. You see if the reports are relevant or not, and you present tables wherever necessary. So in qualitative data, you are basically seeing on how you are propounding more theories from theory, or you are using quotes to substantiate your work. But in quantitative means you are using tables, you are using graphs, you are using other plotting measures in order to show the intensity to which your research has contributed to the project. Now, writing the discussion. Now, discuss the implications of your result in light to your research objectives. So, it is very important to write your discussion. Discussion would mean that apart from analyzing the already laid out primary and secondary data, now you are writing the implication of conducting the research, what you found out, what could have been a better way, the solutions towards the problems, the loopholes in the problems, and so on. Now, it can be combined with results for a qualitative study. Now, common error you find is when you are discussing your own findings without any reference to the existing knowledge. You need to be doubly sure that the research you are doing has not been done by anybody else. Or even so, if you find that people are working along similar lines, you need to demarcate your research in a way by giving it out on the implications on what your research would be basically dealing with, how it will be different from the existing literature, and what were the gaps in the already done literature, and how your research would be one unique research on its own. So your research should build on existing knowledge, so refer back to the literature review. You cannot do a research without going back to the literature review. The literature review is an essential part of your literature process. We'll see the checkpoints while writing the discussion. So, does your findings find support in the literature? Now, where your findings predicted by the literature, how does your research add to the literature? If your findings differ from expectations, then are there any possible explanations why? Does the particular theory or model you have used still hold true in light of your research? And if the theory or model seems flawed, then how can you correct it? So basically the first thing is, you need to find the support in the literature. Now, whatever research you are making, you need to, by the term support, it implies that you need to back up your literature. If you are making a statement, you better back it up in your citation and bibliography as to who made the statement. You cannot just go about throwing in terms in your literature, because there's a way to do so. So, you just cannot state something which has been already stated by someone else without giving due credit to them. You need to be very clear that if someone is making a comment, you need to back it up with substantial proof on how to mold it. Then, where your findings predicted by the literature, that is, if you are doing something which your findings will eventually lead to already that has been predicted, is this a good thing or a bad thing? You need to substantiate. Now, how does your research add to the existing literature? This is the crux of any literary or qualitative study or quantitative study you do. Now, if your findings differ from expectations, then what are the possible explanations and why? So, in say chemical studies, we might say due to the variation in the timings where the chemicals were altered, the reactions were different and so on. So, you need to justify every move of what you publish in your research. Now, does the particular theory or model you have used still hold true in light of your research? So, you just cannot go on saying a fancy theory and you say that this is the end of it. No, you need to back it up. You need to see whether it is expected. You just simply cannot go on conducting experiments and say it's done by you. If it is indeed done by you, if you are innovative to that extent, you need to apply for patents and so on. Now, If the theory or model seems flawed, then how can it be refined in your light of research? For example, uh, in transplantation studies, we have um, this process of transplantation where they say that pigs and humans have a similar composition. So, in medical science nowadays, they use parts of the pigs in human bodies to temporarily give relief to the individual. So, you can't even go and say that due to religious inclinations, I'm not keen on using a pig, but can you use a cow? You cannot do that. If you are doing that, then you need to clearly bring to light why you are interested on bovine transplantation than or another modes of transplantation and so on. So all these needs to be checked while you are giving your report. Now, in the conclusion, references and appendices, you need to find out what your key findings were. So, key findings are very essential. You should be able to also relate to the aims, objectives in the introduction. You may include recommendations for future research. The research must be consistent with the text. The appendices must contain relatable information to the research, and several dry runs should be conducted for a seamless demonstration along with visual cues. So, what is happening here is this. You find the findings, you establish your findings, you write your report, and you analyze the report. You should make sure that your report has a degree of reliability. So whatever aims and objectives you have written, they should stand through at the end of your report. You may include recommendations for future research. So what is happening here is you are, say, making a phenomenal or groundbreaking research say the future of psychodynamics. So it might be path-breaking, but not everybody is a Freud, not everybody is a Lacan. So what you need to do is that even if you make recommendations, it should be strong enough to back up your grounded theory. And references must be very consistent. Nowadays, if you do not give references, your research is liable to be cancelled on grounds of plagiarism. So, you should be very careful when you give your references. The appendices must contain data, information which are relatable to the research, but when it comes finally to presenting your research, you need to have several dry runs or several practice sessions where you rehearse your complete presentation and you know it's a seamless presentation. And for that, if you need visual cues, if you need someone to help you with the timings, or if you need to see the watch, you may do so subtly without letting the audience know that you are using visual cues. Now, key weaknesses found in report writing. Now, key weaknesses found in report writing would include the weaknesses which we find in a bad research. What makes a research good and what makes a research bad? The amount of effort is almost similar, but if your methodology is flawed, then you might end up producing bad research. Now, in report writing, these are the key flaws that have been found. The first is the abstract. If it lacks specific detail, then the abstract is of no use. The abstract should not have excessive details, or the abstract should not have an excessive word length. It should contain only the specific detail of the study which you are about to conduct. Then, introduction. It needs no justification. If it has no justification and its aims and objectives are unclear, then it calls in for a bad research. Now, literature review, if it is not related to the research question, if there is no critical awarenesses, if it is limited in nature by its source, the relevance and theory, then your research is not a good one. It's very essential for you to have a proper research question, and the literature review should go by the research question, like how a gum would go by its stickiness quality. So if there is no stickiness in the gum, a gum is not the gum. So the essence is very important. Critical awareness is essential. Without any critical interpretation, a research cannot be considered to be a research. It will just be a folder of fleeting statements. If the resources are limited, then the examiners will have issues. They will tend to ask you for a review, and they will insist on you going back and doing a stronger research. Then you need to find out if a theory is appropriate or not. You simply cannot employ a feminist theory just because it is a feminist research. You need to see on what aspects you are employing the theory, whether it addresses the needs of your research structure or not. In methodology, if you lack specific detail, if you cannot provide a good justification, if the awareness that you are creating has no reliability, it is not valid, and it is a general proposition which is floated and everyone knows it, then it's not a good research. Then results, the focus on graphs, limited analysis and lacking relevance is also a turn-off. You cannot have a research report by just giving graphs. It is not possible for someone to just read graphs and carry on with the research process. A proper research process will use figures and graphs, but at a limited basis. And with each proper graph, there will be proper explanations, proper analysis, and you will also cite why you need the graph. If your entire data is duplicated with just one graph, and that is your research study, if you condense your research study into just one pie diagram without going into a systematic description whatsoever, it's a useless research study. Discussion, if you are not revisiting the literature, simply repeating results, lack of awareness of the implication of the findings, all of these would lead to a total destabilization of your research study. Now conclusion, if it is unrelated to the discussion, or if it is just a lengthy paragraph where you're going on and on without a specific direction of study, then it's of no use. Now key presentation weakness, if word limit is not adhered to. No one likes paragraphs in a PowerPoint presentation. If it's long running paragraphs without any breakage, not only will it lead to a disinterest amongst the audience, but it will also lead to a form of disgust in the audience, because what the audience looks forward in a presentation is how you present it, which is why it is the very word hidden in the word presentation itself. So you should have word limits which are adhered to. You should have appropriate formatting. If a report you are submitting has lots of spelling errors, it has unnecessary draggage of words, it has a lot of inappropriate formatting, then it will not appeal to the reader and they might just stop reading it. So inappropriate use of visual material could also hinder your research report. Then incorrect spelling and grammar. It just hits your eye. The lack of signposting and linking. If there is no linkage, why you have jumped from one theory to one theory, if there is no connection between that, then your research is either said to be a fabricated culmination of just letters and words with no meaning, or your research could be based on the fact that you are just collecting data without substantiating or asserting the reason why you have included that. Now, delivery of report in case of oral presentations. Now, every oral presentation will have the ways and means in which the report delivery could be ascertained. Now, there are four basic forms of delivery. The first is the impromptu method, where accuracy of the report is risked. For example, you have to go and you have to let people know about the effects of a particular sample of oil on the other sample. So you just cannot climb up on stage and say, hey friends, I went to this mall, I showed them our product, then I sampled their product, I tried to bully people to buy our product, now people have been held into ransom, and now just because they are buying our product only, that is the reason why I'm allowing them out of the mall, or I'm not. What are you speaking now? You're speaking gibberish. So you cannot go impromptu on the stage and speak gibberish. It absolutely makes no sense on what I have related to you in this few seconds, because what I am saying is absolutely making no concern whatsoever. It's making no relation, and I am just imposing my gibberish to you. Is it possible that I can hold ransom to people in a mall if they don't buy my oil products? I'll be the first one to be sent for a psychiatric analysis. So what happens is, impromptu presentations are faulty by nature, because firstly, you do not have the proof of whether the research is conducted. You do not have a specific graph. You do not have a specific report on how you conducted the research, whether you conducted it or not, or whether one fine day, after sleeping for several hours, you decide to just walk up and present in the stage saying that, okay, I conducted the research and our oil, because it was not doing well, I forced people to buy our oil. It is not going to work that way. You need to substantiate why people are not buying the oil. If they are buying the oil, what branding have you used? What are the marketing techniques that you have used? And so on. So, to properly present it, you cannot go by the impromptu method. Then, speaking from memory method, where in case of a memory lapse, important information may not get conveyed. Then again, you are diligent enough to carry on with the process. You have submitted your hardbound report. Now you ought to make a presentation in front of your clients. Now, during the process, you are laying about a rationale, argument on why is there a need for that particular brand of oil, how do you tend to go about with the product development, and so on forth. But if you miss something crucial as how do you intend to compete with the existing products in the market, such little things or such important things, because your memory can always never be trusted. It is undergoing a continuous biological process of filtration. It is creating memories, it is doing away with memories, it's storing it, and so on. So speaking from memory is a very risky process, and it is usually not suggested to be carried out when it comes to oral presentations. The next is reading the report page by page. Now, I carry on my report. I can read it through the book or I can carry on cues. Now what is happening is I am reading it page by page. Everyone is getting disinterested. Why? Because it is supposed to be an oral presentation and it is not a reading session where we are laying emphasis on your stress, tone and intonation and inflections of speech. That is not being done. What we are doing is we are going through your report and you are presenting it in a manner which interests the audience. So reading the report page by page, even though it assures the coverage of the facts. In the previous two methods, there was no assurance that the facts were covered. But reading will assure that the facts are covered. But what is happening in this process is people are getting bored, and if people are bored, people are disinterested, they will simply walk away from your presentation. Now, extempo delivery needs to be carefully planned and rehearsed. Several dry runs should be conducted for a seamless presentation. Extempo, when you were in school, you had this particular computation called the extempo speech competition, where in this box where you had different sheets, you had to pick it and you had to say it. Now that extempo meant speaking on topics impromptu, but in this particular extempo delivery, you are keeping yourself busy with the essentials of presentation, but you're sticking to your report and you are slide-wise, you are presenting it in a logical and systematic manner. Now, given the biological functioning of memory and decay, you might tend to forget things, and it is natural that you forget. But this can be solved by running several dry runs. That is, several rehearsal sessions will make sure that when you go to deliver your presentation, you deliver it point on. Now, use of computers in research. Now, computers are very crucial for the research process. Now, computers are used by data organizations and for coding purposes. Now, these children as young as say 10 to 12 years are learning coding. Why? When you code and you apply a particular code, it becomes easy for you to evaluate your results in a quicker process. So, data organization is happening. In qualitative data, the computer will go on in giving you information on how the data should be analyzed, how the data should be read and structured. And coding would imply in say qualitative and quantitative aspects, you are using packages, statistical packages like Minitab and SPSS packages, and you are running the code so that if you are doing a research on a large sample, by running the code, you are able to calculate the processes at a faster rate. Then storing the data in a computer. It is very important and it is a very useful tool that computers are providing us with now. So what is happening is the storage of data in the computer will actually provide you the necessary storage and retrieval device where when you want you can collect the data, when you want you can just store it back, make changes, and the changes will also be recorded and kept properly. Then selection of appropriate statistical measures. This is very important. You have a host of statistical measures. One tail approach, two tail approach, t-test, z-test. You have the probabilities, you have your derivation, the standard derivation, the Latin square, the chi-square, and all of that. Then in humanities, we have SPSS packages, we have mini-tabs. All of these will help in collection and assessment and analysis of the data collected. Data presentation is very important because when you are giving an oral presentation, people might get bored of your lectures. So data presentation, like in this method, I'm using a PowerPoint presentation, or in business studies, you may give an Excel presentation. So visually, you are luring people to listen to your lecture or presentation. So computers does plays a vital role because you are using a PowerPoint, you are able to use images, you are able to use attractive ways in which you are able to retain the interest of your listener. Now, report typing, this cannot be achieved by simply using a marker pen. No, what I am doing, I am using the computer, the laptop, to type it out. Now, what is it aiding me in? It is aiding me in the presentation process. And if I use a marker or a blackboard, I need to rub, I need to write, I need to rub again. It is an unnecessary hassle. So when I walk out of this classroom, my fingers are clean. I am all set with a data which cannot be erased because it has already been sent to my mails, it's already recorded, and so on. So computers thereby play a very vital role. Then lastly comes your report presentation. For example, if your report presentation is done and you adhere to the formatting methods and everything, the computer will help you in getting the report presentation type. Now, apart from the typing, when you print it out, you are again making it into hardbound or paperbound copies, and what is aiding you? The computer. Now, you will send the computer. What if you want to send your data to places where it is not feasible to send it by mail? So, in an instant, sitting here via the use of computer, you can sit and send an email, or sitting here you can give a powerful presentation of your research, and it can be telecasted in pan outlets worldwide and nationwide, right? So these are the uses of computers in the research studies. Now we come to the last aspect, that is assessing the research paper. Now, an assessment of a research paper would include setting the theme, focus, justification, use of literature, sources, methodology, and the like. So, we would deal in detail with how we would go forward in assessing the research report. The first thing is we have to make sure if the abstract is giving us a clear idea of what is there in the report. The abstract should be specific. It should clearly describe my research objectives, the methodology I have adopted, and the main conclusions that have emerged because of the conduction of the research study. Now, if it fits this framework, then it's a good research project. Now, if my table of contents are well structured or not, and if it gives pictures of what is included, then my research study is a good one. But you need to go slow on this method because too much of research, pictures, and the data structure would imply that it is just diagram based and not much effort has been done into writing it out. Now, have you included a list of tables and a list of figures if appropriate? This is very important in the content. So, you have one page where you see a culmination of the various figures and data you have used throughout your research report. Now, all of these, if you do not have an index which will show us what tables you have listed or if the figures listed are appropriately placed or not, then it makes no sense. Now, in your introductions, have you introduced your research adequately? That is also very important in a good research report. So basically, if you adhere to this, it's just a preliminary setting of the research theme. Then comes your focus and justification aspect. So in the focus and justification aspect, we see how clearly we have focused on the research. Now you have to see if your research report tightly defines or contains, or it does not contain any relevant data or not, or if it is going off point, then it's not valid. Then you have to see whether you have clearly constructed a suitable research question or hypothesis which will lead to a clear set of ideas and related subsidiary questions or objectives. Otherwise, there is no point in the hypothesis, and the hypothesis might be defined as a null and void hypothesis. Now, if the hypothesis is null and void and you intend to show why it is null and void, you should make sure that you have your subsidiary backup of questions ready. Now, use of literature. You should issue your focus on the theory. What theory you are using and why are you underpinning on a particular theory. You should see if it is clear which theory and model you should have adopted. Now, how up to date are you with your references? Have you included the most up to date work in your area or not? That is the sole purpose of having a literature review. You go, you review, you get back to whatever is already established, and from there you carry on whether you are capable of providing newer inputs. Now, have you managed to identify and get hold of the work of key writers in your particular area? Have you ensured that you have paid due attention to classic sources? So you cannot just go on and say so and so selected writers have said that now there is a gap in this and I am going to put newer insights. You simply cannot do that. What if it is classically stated by the theorists, the legends? So all of these should be clearly seen in your literature review. Now, use of sources. What sources are you using to conduct your literature review? What sources you are using for data collection? So have you used a variety of sources, or are you over relying only on certain authors? Have you tried to include or acknowledge competing theories or viewpoints? Have you simply selected literature that supports your hypothesis, or you are adding on to a new genre of literature which has not explored the current research problem the way it should have been? That is seen. Then again, you will see if it is clear to the reader how your research relates to what has been done before, or does it build to the existing knowledge. Now, in your literature review, you have to see whether you merely identify and describe with a real critical edge, or have you been critical enough or not. Now, how well you have researched the literature on your topic and the specific point should also be seen. Now, have you explored all possible sources? This should also be monitored in your use of resources. This should be clearly specified when you write your research report. Now, use of methodology. Do you clearly identify and explain your choice of research design? Your research design can be something which is not specified for every research study. So what research studies you are using, what design you are using can be detrimental to many factors. So you have to see if your research methods are appropriate by the given chosen hypothesis, or your research questions and subsidiary questions or objectives. You simply cannot go and conduct an ethnographic research just because you want to, or you simply cannot sit in the comforts of your home or your laboratory and conduct an exploratory research. You cannot. You need to justify the rationale behind choosing a particular research design frame. So you should see if the methods you have used are appropriate to the hypothesis that you have chosen, and if they are able to stick to the subsidiary questions and objectives that you have put forward or the intended audience might put forward to you. So you have to make it clear who are the subjects, for which audience you have created that research study, and to what population these studies belong, and if it is clearly selected. That is, if you have not committed any selection based error. The next is rationale in your research report. So in the rationale, you have to ask, why did you choose your research? If an existing instrument is there, whose it is, why did you choose it? And you have to clear out why your methods were most appropriate than the methods in which the similar research study was already conducted. Then you have to see whether you are making assumptions. You need to know in what terms of research methods and who would be the reader. Then you have to see whether you have expressed yourself clearly and have given adequate details. And you would need to also see if someone will be able to replicate your study on the basis of information if you have given. So generally, your research should be such that it should not allow the process of replication, but it should allow the process of extension. Then you have to clearly see the strengths of your methodology, and if you have any limitations of your methodology, or if there is any way in which you might have done it a little differently. Then comes the presentation of your research results. Now, for this, you need to see if your findings are clearly presented, if you have included any table or data for an inferential analysis of the quantitative data. You should also see if you have properly included graphs, charts, and so on. So, merely putting on graphs and charts would just argue the process of research report writing. You need to clearly see how you tend to go about, if the charts clearly relate to your research objectives or not. Now, how will you analyze your findings is detrimental. If you have undertaken quantitative studies, what statistical measures have you used should be clearly indicated. Now, if you are using this test properly or not, it should be seen. How you interpret the results should also be seen. And for qualitative analysis, you should show how you have demonstrated your analyzed data in a systematic manner. Now, how will you present the discussion and conclusion aspect? So, in your discussion and conclusion aspect, you will see if you can adequately visit the literature and relate your findings to the literature, or do you simply discuss what has been found? You should need to see if your arguments are coherent, they are logical or not, and if they are consistent with the evidence by which they have been collected. You need to see how your conclusions clearly emerge from the data collected. Now, you need to acknowledge your sources, and you need to see if the evidence collected contradicts with your theory or not. Then you need to return to your research question or hypothesis, and you need to also evaluate your research in a manner to see whether the strengths and limitations of your research study is implemented or not. Now we come to the general frameworks for the presentation of our report. We have to see if the content is logically structured or not. You simply cannot carry on with your research process just because you want to. You have to make sure that there is a logical explanation of the content which you are planning to study. You have to see if your work is well presented. Well presented does not imply that you decorate your work and submit it to the organization. It does not imply that you are using a very high quality material or you are using a very high quality technology to suddenly beam your results. No. Well presented work would imply a proper and thorough research work where we are using a proper research methodology, sticking by the writing guidelines and submitting it. So basically you need to make sure if you have used appropriate materials to enhance presentation via graphs, tables and illustrations. You have to see if you have conducted a thorough reading through the entire work which you have presented by doing regular proof checks and eliminating countless spelling errors, typological errors, poor grammar, poor sentence construction. We always see people keep on switching the verbs. It's very essential. If you write your report in the past tense, your entire report should be in the past tense. Right? So these factors should be kept in mind. Then you also need to see how you link the chapters and make use of signposting to the readers. Do you set out your intentions clearly? Chapter division is very important because you form a linkage through your chapters. If you do not have proper chapter divisions, by chapter divisions I don't mean chapter 1, 2, 3, 4 and conclusion. No, there should be a rationale for selecting the chapters as they will form a guiding link through which you proceed with your research methodology. The last is finding the references and bibliography with the required detail in the required format. Now the bibliography and the appendix form is very essential because if you do not have a proper bibliography, then what happens is you might be pulled up for plagiarism. Intellectual theft. Plagiarism is nothing but intellectual theft. So if your research report does not give the due credit to the work the academicians have done prior to your research, then you lose it out on that. The next is, have you acknowledged all your sources and made it clear when it is your views that are being expressed or not, or it is others' views. So this part is very essential because you need to give due credit. For that we have footnotes where you are not just propounding an idea, but in the footnotes you are making it clear as to why you are making that connection, from where you are making connection. So basically you are acknowledging the academician for the information that he has passed on and from where you are dragging on. Then you need to see if you have made use of proper appendices. Now, are there any unnecessary appendices? That also needs to be taken off because minimalization and specific spreading of information is a necessity of any research work. Then you have to ensure that your report is as stimulating and as interesting as possible. If it does not interest the audience enough, then it is a wastage of your effort. Now you have to convey your enthusiasm to the reader through the project. It's not about saying I'm very excited about conducting the project, but it should reflect on the quality of work that you are submitting through the research project. So basically, it would imply that in any good research project, you go through the various phases which has been discussed in today's class. That is, you know how to write the research report, you know why there is a necessity for a research report, you know the types and the stages of writing, the structure, the delivery, and the usage of the various technical and modes for the same. So with this, we come to the end of our presentation.